So, good morning for everyone who is watching the Eastern Europe Studies Center morning broadcast from Vilnius. Today we're going to have a bit different discussion in a different format. We have live speakers in our center right now. So we are going to be discussing the recent happenings, events in Belarus, but also we're going to discuss reports that have been released by University of Warsaw. We have here representatives also from this university. So right now we have Mr. Maxim Rust from University of Warsaw, also Oleksandr Shevchenko, Mr. Kacper Wańczyk, and Mr. Andžej Pukšto from Vytauto Magnus University in Lithuania. So as I mentioned, the reports that have been published from University of Warsaw are available now in the public, but also we're going to discuss those reports in a broader context, trying to also reach the recent events that have been happening not only in Belarus, but also watching from a broader perspective that also touched upon the region. So first of all, I'd like to ask our speakers today, starting from a broader perspective. So the recent events, speaking about the military perspective, we can see are right now tensioning. So could you provide your own perspective that is also based on your reports, but also on your recent insights and observations? How much is still Belarus independent in terms of military entity? So how much Lukashenko in particular, but also Belarus as a country, is willing to sacrifice its own independence in terms of the military capacities, but maybe not only military capacities, but speaking about the country in general, just in order to, have this status quo in its relations with Russia and with the West. So please, this is the first question.
Okay, so thank you very much for the short introduction. So first of all, I just want to thank you very much for the opportunity to organize our first international presentation of our analytical group here in Vilnius. It's the first international presentation. It's really very great honor for us to organize it here in Vilnius. Maybe some words about our group, our report again. So in year 2021, the analytical group Belarus in the region operating at the East European Studies Center of the University of Warsaw prepared 4 comprehensive and big reports. Our group consists of analysts with recognized international and analytical background and achievements, and there are experts and analysts from 4 countries, from Belarus, from Poland, from Ukraine, and from Lithuania. Our permanent team consists of 9 experts, but when elaborating more specific particular issues, other experts given field are invited to our reports. So we operate on the principle of classical think tank, but more ad hoc character-like. And the main goal of our group is supply a reliable analysis and deeply research of the social political situation in Belarus to a wide range of experts, diplomats, politicians, researchers, and of course decision makers. So our first report, entitled Belarus 2021 Perspective of Change, was the first report, and we focused on the main challenges facing Belarus in 2021 in various dimensions: social, political, cultural, military, and economical. The second report, entitled In the Supporting Embrace of the Brother Belarusian-Russian Relations last years. Of course, the main directions of Belarusian and Russian relations at the current stage and in the conditions of the ongoing socio-political crisis are analyzed. It's economy, military cooperation, political cooperation. It's very reliable for nowadays situation. and of course about the cultural and propaganda influence. Third report entitled Economy in the Shadow of Politics, the Economic Situation in Belarus. The authors focused on the challenges facing the Belarusian economy in relations with Russia, with collective and wide West, European Union and China. A very important aspect was the analysis of possibilities of economic support for democratic Belarus and the dimension of Belarusian propaganda in this economy dimension. And our last fourth report entitled Dictators Border Poland and Belarus towards the border crisis. I think it was reliable for Baltic countries because it was about this migration crisis on Belarus and EU borders. We try to answer the questions: what are the probably and main goals of the Belarusian regime, how it used the border crisis for its own propaganda process, and how it destabilizes the situation in the region, and how it forces the dialogue with Western decision makers. Now, and we are currently working on the fifth report, which will be a summary of circa 500 days since the beginning of the phenomenon that we called Belarus 2020. And we will focus on the development of political, social, and economic relations of Belarus, as well as on the constitutional referendum and the situation of scientific elite in Belarus. So, as you mentioned, all of our reports are available on the Center for East European Studies at the University of Warsaw website in Polish and English, and of course, but in hard copy too. And of course, we invite you kind to read them and download and enjoy. And we hope our reports can help you, if you are expert, politician, decision maker, to understand more deeply the current situation in Belarus.
So thank you very much for a presentation of your reports. But going back to the broader discussion, so as I mentioned, the recent tensions in Belarus from the military perspective are causing questions and issues on the independence of Belarus. So how much we can treat still Belarus as an independent entity in terms of its relations with Russia, with the West, and as a country in general?
Right. Starting from the beginning, I would say. So even before 2020, one needs to remember that Belarus was always a member of different integration associations. It's been a founding member of the organization of the Collective Defense Treaty. So militarily speaking, Belarus was always very tight with Russian military structures. The joint exercises, joint operations, etc., were always conducted. Same goes for the cooperation of special services. So I don't believe there is any particular change that came with 2020. It's always been there. It's just right now both countries are exploiting the possibilities to show how deeply they are interconnected and how easily they can cooperate in terms of security. When we talk about economy, I do believe is a bit more complex, because on one hand, yes, Belarus is again a part of EU, so the Eurasian Economic Union. But then again, Eurasian Economic Union couldn't be mistaken for European Union, because in European Union you do have a certain legal structures that that ensure a proper economic cooperation, while in the Eurasian Economic Union, these rules are only, I don't know, for show. So you do have a constant discussions, constant negotiations on economic issues, particularly in energy sphere, but it also touch upon all other issues. So while being a member of this integration group, Belarus is still negotiating its. I would even say it's not Belarus. President Lukashenko. We don't say president because we don't recognize the result of the election. So Lukashenko is constantly negotiating its position towards Russia in terms of economy to ensure that he is staying in power as long as he can. So to sum it up, I wouldn't say that there is a particular change in the way Belarus functions in international relations after 2020, but still this integration, these relations with Russia were always very close, very deep and very comprehensive. Thank you.
Thank you. So, but speaking of possible integration that you just mentioned into deeper structures of Russia, so there was this referendum that was also mentioned in your report. So speaking of the referendum, what is going to be held this year, and a new governmental structure is going to be established in the framework of this referendum as well. So my question is, what is the meaning of this referendum, and what is Lukashenko seeking by establishing a new government structure, and what is the purpose in general of this referendum, and what is trying Lukashenko to say to its own public by creating this own structure and by holding this referendum?
Okay, so we are now 3 weeks before this referendum. There are 3 main dimensions for understanding this referendum campaign. The first one is more like response of the Belarusian regime to this part of Belarusian democratic and protest part of Belarusian society that would at the demonstration they said that we want change, and Lukashenko and the regime said, okay, so you want to change, now you have this change. Then we changed the constitution. But after the deeply analyzing of this new project, we will publish a broad and big analysis of this new constitutional version in our upcoming issue. And after this deep analyzing, so formally there are different changes, but there are no so strong change in political structure. In fact, if we saying about the position of president of the Belarus, so it's really nothing changed. If we say about this new governmental institution like all Belarusian People's Council, so it will be something between Belarusian executive, something like from the government, something like the parliament privilege in Belarus. So, and really this changes cannot change character of Belarusian regime, but there are many interesting points if we speak about the ideological and the cultural dimension of Belarusian state. So we see clear propagandical and populist turn to the right. It's about Christian values, about feminism, etc., etc. And it's very interesting. There are very interesting changes in Belarusian international positions. So as you mentioned about the Russian so-called integration with this roadmaps, in this project of constitution, we see new backdoors for the development of multi-partisan system for the system of political parties in Belarus. Many of experts extended that it could be situation in which Russia established in Belarus 2 or 3 big pro-Russian political parties. So, but I am sure that Lukashenko wouldn't avoid to establish these parties. And it was the second moment of this constitutional reform. And what is the third and the last about the constitution? More about not the same constitutional project itself, but the situation about this constitution. I think this campaign could be the last chance for regime in Minsk try to normalize relations with collective West, because I think Belarusian political and ruling elite understand how mute and how catastrophical is the situation in this dimension. So I think I don't know, because nobody knows, but it's the last chance to try normalize these relations, maybe during the partly political ammunition or steps like this, but it's very interesting time because we will have and see it this month.
If I can, I want to add a little bit to your first question about independence of Belarus. My area in our group is Ukrainian position towards Belarus, and during this migrant crisis in autumn a few months ago, in autumn 2020, one official Ukrainian position was that this crisis, the strategy of this crisis was developed in strongly connection with Russia. So it wasn't politics of Lukashenko or Belarus. Ukraine recognized this crisis as Russian operation, and Lukashenko just make it. From Ukrainian position, Max said that referendum can be changed to normalization of relations with West, but from Ukrainian position, after Lukashenko recognized Crimea as part of Russia, I think it was crossing of red line, after which it's impossible to come back to normal relations, yes, of Ukrainian governments, any governments with Lukashenko's regime. So I think in Ukrainian context, referendum cannot be a factor for normalization relations.
But speaking of further Belarus relations with the West and also migrant crisis, what we just mentioned, because those two things are interconnected. So what is the future of the migrant crisis and the Belarus relations with the West? Because is there any new is this a new reality? I mean, the constant tensions on the border, or maybe some other type of hybrid attacks, or maybe in the long run, Lukashenko is trying to avoid possible additional sanctions and is trying to normalize its relations with the West as well as Ukraine. So what is the perspective of the future Belarus foreign policy with the West and, of course, Ukraine as well?
Sure. Right. So I see this migrant, I would say border crisis. No, it's not migrant crisis, it's border crisis. I would see it as a way that Lukashenko tries to do what he always did. So making situation worse to make it better, right? So we are piling up different problems so we can get back from them and then return to normal relations. It used to work in the past. it's my personal opinion. To some extent, it worked this time because in the end he got a telephone call from Merkel, and then there was a kind of re-engagement with Belarusian authorities. I think the problem is that they hadn't really thought over the problem of having people from different culture sitting during the winter in Minsk. That's the security element that they haven't really thought through. So that's why they were forced from one hand because of the Western pressures with sanctions and political pressure, and on the other hand from the inside because they started to see this this presence as a problem. I wouldn't say this is a new normality, it's an old normality. Lukashenko is trying to use the same policy tools towards the West he always used. So he's always trying to do the same thing. So piling up problems and then trying to get back from them, expecting the West to lower sanctions or whatever. Referendum is one of these examples. So this is like we do a referendum and then we go back to the EU and we say, well, let's see, we're trying to do something, we're trying to make some changes within the system, so let's not hinder our abilities to do that, help us to do that, etc., etc. Yeah, to answer your question simply, I don't see this as a new tool. It's the same old tool, has been always used. This will be used again and again. I personally believe that there will be more tries, how to say that? There'll be again attempts to use migrants as a weapon towards EU countries when the weather gets better. So maybe in spring or something like that. That's why EU countries needs to be better prepared for that. So a policy of building a wall and engaging in beating people, it's not the best policy, because this will happen as global migration processes are, that's the new reality that we are facing. So trying just to build a wall that will, in a way, try to stop the wave is not the best idea, because the wave will always find a way around the wall. So there is a time for, we have winter months to rethink policies and find proper ways to address this issue. Again, beating people and building walls is not the best idea to address this problem. Thank you.
If I can to add a little, in general, I think when we speak about reaction of the West to the changes to Belarus from the August of 2020, we need to say that question of democracy of Belarus was returned to international arena on the schedule of West diplomats, and of course also to the European Union institutions. If we will check chronologically events, I'm not speaking now about migration policy, but if we will checking chronological events from the August of 2020, when Svetlana Tikhanovskaya moved to the Vilnius, we need to say that question of Belarus and of democratic Belarus, of question of democracy in Belarus, and the activity of the office of Svetlana Tsikhanouskaya is really huge. I would like only to remind that even these activities were started from the end of August 2020. We had here in Vilnius visit of Vice State Secretary Stefan Begun, even during Trump administration. Little later, we have, after the very long break, visit here, official visit of French President Macron of the end of September of 2020. Little later, also on the autumn of 2020, Vilnius was visited by Prime Minister of Norway. Also, Chief of Canadian diplomacy moved here. So we need to say that this period when the West dealt with Lukashenko, when it was methodology to deal with Lukashenko, and it was such policy half and half. So I think now we need to say that that is hugely diplomatic isolation of Lukashenko. It's one thing. And another thing we need to say that there were a lot of skepticism about activities and diplomatic initiatives of Svetlana Tsikhanouskaya. But from my point, my view of activities of Svetlana Tsikhanouskaya office in the West, in European Union institutions, is very positive, is very huge. So there are different views of West leaders to Svetlana Tsikhanouskaya, but in general, a lot of activities of her office, and she's doing a huge job on one side, but on another side, it's very positive welcome in European Union countries, but also in such countries as Canada and USA, as Norway, as Great Britain. Of course, we would like to have, and we little miss more strict European Union policy and another West countries' policies when we speak about sanction, about political isolation of Lukashenko. But I hope it will go deeper in the debate. It's one thing. Another thing, when we speak about migration, or you called more correctly border crisis. I think also this border crisis return to European Union institutions tables, return discussion about migration, European Union migration policy. And here, even, of course, maybe it's not very correct to see some positive view that European Union started to rethink on one hand all migration policy, and on another hand, European Union institutions saw that this migration crisis sometimes are connected with hybrid threats. And there is not the same situation when migrants, refugees are coming by ships, by boat through the Mediterranean Sea. But here, a migration crisis is used and connected with destabilization by neighborhood countries, by Belarus and by Russia. And I think here I would like to say, and I would like to stress that also eyes of European leaders was more opened when they really understood how tools Russia and Belarus is using toward European Union and toward European Union countries. So in general, of course, we would like maybe, and Belarusians and the democratic Belarusians would like to have more quick, more concrete position and reaction of European Union on and different countries. But in general, if we will check situation what we had 3 or 4 years ago, I think rethinking and reopening and returning of Belarusian issues and question to the European Union institutions, to the US foreign policy or to Great Britain policy in general, this is really huge. So of course we would like to have all changes more quick and tomorrow, but in general I think we need to say that during the last 2 years this changing around Belarus, it's really very big. Yeah.
So just as you mentioned, the question of democracy is still very much alive and present in the West, and the possible change in Belarus has always been driven by the civil society. So could you describe, please, what is the current state of civil society in Belarus, and how should or can the West help just to can help the civil society just to generally improve the state of democracy in Belarus?
I can summarize it very briefly. If we talk about really civic society, so it's under pressure, and this active part of civil society of active Belarusians are now in Belarus underground, because those people that took part in protests or which developed this social and political agenda are in jails. For today, there are more than 1,000 of political prisoners, only according to the Vyasna Spring Human Rights Center. And the majority of these people, this most important, more active part of Belarusian civil society, they are not in jail now, they are abroad, or they have to be still and do nothing to live, and have to have a minimal sense of stability, or sense of stability, their families, works, etc., etc. And this part of civil society there are not in jail now in Belarus, are abroad, in Warsaw, in Vilnius, in the US, and in other countries. And of course, we, from our Eurocentrical perspective, we like to say Belarusians are so they are fighting, and there are many thousands of protests in Minsk, but in Belarusian really conditions, there is not so, because this whole society, not only the civil society, is under pressure, and it's very, it was weakened by the Belarusian authorities. So it's a huge and big problem for this situation entire in the Belarus. And for me, it's a very big question. Of course, our Belarusian independent and new political actors active from the abroad. So the question is how really they can develop this political democratical agenda for Belarusians, and how Belarusians which are in Belarus can accept or can be supplied by those ideas. So this, for me, the main question is really impact of activities of Belarusian new political actors now. And it's very complicated situation about this civil society in Belarus. But I stress that let's have that it's not only that all Belarusians are fighting now, because it's 1.5 year after the beginning of the protest and after beginning the mass repressive mechanisms. So please don't forget about this. And it's not so how we want to be, and sometimes from our perspective, our visual thinking, it's really not true if it comes about the real situation with civil society in Belarus. And so it's fact.
What is the future of protests? Because protests have always been mentioned as the main element that drives the change inside of Belarus. So can we expect any further protests inside of this country, or just there has to be used other means and tools just in order to make the change inside of the country?
Okay. Kind of answering to your question, but also building on what Max just said. So the big problem is that the authorities are targeting every single thing that seems to them as a self-organization movement, right? So Food Not Bombs in Minsk, so the organization that provides food for homeless people, 1 month ago were forced to close their activities. This is, I mean, this is just stupid. This is just guys that prepare vegetarian food for people that are homeless. There is no revolution there. Not immediate one, at least. So the problem is that every single activity that is happening and that shows some kind of cooperation between people is seen by authorities as a threat. But then again, as far as I understand from our recent discussions, this cooperation still exists. I mean, the people are so what changed after 2020 is that people are still keeping these networks of connections, contacts that were created during the protest of 2020. This is hard. This is maybe not everyday work. They don't maybe make bombs or whatever, but they still cooperate, which is a huge important change when you think about the Belarusian society before 2020, which was always to me a society of close people that were close, but not cooperating. So close but not cooperating. What 2020 changed is that these people started to gather together to change things. I believe that this is a very important moment for the EU, that we should focus on supporting this kind of networks. So there is this. So unfortunately, current financial and political EU support focus on doing things in the EU and with politicians. There is this initiative which is called Belarus Beehive. It's a part of Eastern Partnership Fund, but unfortunately, it's a very small one. But that's the way we should do things. So this is exactly helping people inside the country to keep this networks running. I don't believe they would get to the streets tomorrow or the day after tomorrow, but I do believe, and maybe Alexander will correct me here, but I do believe that experience we have with repeated Ukrainian revolutions show us that the more time. So at a certain point, you got this, you just passed the threshold of civil society engagement. And when people start being engaged together, at a certain point, they move to what happened in Belarus, in Ukraine in 2014. So you have a real grassroots movement that is ready for change. So we need to be ready as the EU for as Mao Zedong would say, a long march. But I believe that at the end, there is a chance for a proper civil society change. Yes?
Yes, the Ukrainian story was a little bit another, but I agree that for development of civil society in any country, we need time, society need time, and probably if, to find some historical stories like in Belarus now, I think we should remember about Solidarity Revolution in Poland in 1980, and Poland needs 10 years more to become free country, and this 10 years was years of development this civil society in Poland, and actually already another generation was in 1990, yes, when Poland began to be free country. So that's why I think Belarusian civil society needs this time, and this process already started, I think.
If I can shortly add, so please, it's very important from my perspective, and I think for this really social and political uprising in Belarus as a whole, all the time now I point out that please remember that Belarus 2020, it's not only about protests, it's not only about demonstrations, because if you study deeply this dynamics of social and political situation inside the society, it's now for me, it's not so important the issue of the question of protest, will they be or not. So the main and the critical significant change, the most important for me is that deeply and constant change happen inside in the deep inside of the Belarusian society. And I think it's very important for us to remember about this, that the Belarusian society as whole is now a little bit or very another society than before 2 years ago.
Going to now a bit different field of economy. So we see recently that Belarus has shown an initiative and also announced its own sanctions specifically against Lithuania. Right now we see that a few, well, not a few, but generally the most of shipments used by train are now blocked on the border of Belarus. So we see there are counter sanctions against sanctions that are imposed by the West, or particularly by Lithuania and Poland. So can we expect any additional or any, let's just say, more creative ways of answering the sanctions that have been imposed against Russia or Belarus? Or this is just all we can expect, just a few minor or just, let's just say, well, actions that are more dedicated to the public relations to its own public, or this is just something we can expect more just on a permanent basis?
Right. For the three Baltic countries, but Lithuania in particular, relations with Belarus economically were always important from the point of view of transit of goods. It was important for both the train company, what you call them, the Железнодорожный company, and the ports. My fear is we saw this last November and December when the sanctions were starting to get into place, that Vilnius was kind of eager to kind of counter possibilities that these goods flow would go towards Latvia or Estonia. Ultimately, the decision was made to block the transit, which I do believe it's a good decision, because Belarus will keep selling. I mean, we all know that the biggest buyers of fertilizers from Belarus are not European countries, so they're not affected by the EU sanctions, but the transport is crucial here. So I do believe that decision to block the transit was a good one, because it influences the internal economic position of Belarusian authorities. But I think that Belarusians will try to go around it anyway, and I'm a bit afraid of a position that Estonian government took towards oil products. They said, well, European sanctions are about buying oil products. We're not buying, we're just transiting them. So there is when there is a huge money involved, and both in fertilizer products, fertilizers and oil products, there is always a big money involved. It's easy to find schemes that would help to go around sanctions. Let's not forget that Ukraine is still buying oil products from Belarus, while at the same time politically stating that they are aligning with European sanctions. I kind of lost the train of thought here. I do not believe that in coming year we'll see a direct impact of economic sanctions on political decisions of the Belarusian government. Why? For two reasons. One reason is that Belarusian economic structure is constructed in a way that it allows to move resources freely. So Lukashenko can move assets from one part of the economy that is working good towards the other part that's not working so good. Second element is the support from Russia, and I don't see at this stage any decision on part of Moscow that would stop the financial support for Belarus. So in terms of remaining in power and controlling the government, controlling the state, I do believe that Lukashenko will have enough resources to do that. Will this lead to pauperization of the society? Yes, it will. So, yeah. So again, all boils down to the fact that the government will feed itself, as we used to say in Poland in the 80s, but the society will feel the negative effects of deterioration of the economic situation. Thank you.
And probably the last question of our discussion, just speaking generally about the future of Belarus. So what is the perception of the Belarusian society of the recent events, speaking of the sanctions applied by the West, speaking of about recent deployment of additional troops by Russia in Belarus, and speaking about the economic situation in general in Belarus. So what is the perception of the Belarusian society of this situation, and what is the perspective of Belarus, speaking of the possible, relations with the West in the future, the possible relations with Russia, and maybe even possible integration. So, and what is the perception of Belarusians of possible integrations deeper in Russian governmental structures, because this may be also be presented as a tool to improve economic situation in Belarus. So what is the future and what is the perception?
Just note about this question. Now it's very hard, very difficult to compare this social change, because now in independent and retail sociology in Belarus, this public opinion research, is in fatal state. So it was troubles before 2020, of course, but there are different companies that made this research, but now we have only partly question narratives and this kind of research, and we can base only on these small N groups. It's circa 1,000 people, but in this political and stress political situation, it's hard to interpret this research, because our fear is so that society is under pressure and under fears, and it's problematic to really try to understand what the society think about this or these dimensions and questions. And saying about future, so it's very good, but very multi-dimensional question. So maybe Alex, your opinions, your point of view about this issue.
I would like maybe to tell not about how I imagine future, but what European Union countries must be ready. So of course it's a big question of mass media, of information. Here, on one hand, it seems that it's very simple question and really developed, but I still would like to emphasize that informational war around Belarus, I think it's an extremely important question, and even if you know, yesterday Russia canceled permission for Deutsche Welle office in Moscow. So this informational battle around Belarus and informational battle with Belarusian people, it will be more and more stronger. It's one thing. And another gap I would like to around which I would like to stress here attention is also humanitarian help for Belarus, because we need to have in my mind about pandemic, about the coronavirus things. So on one hand we must be ready in Lithuania, in Poland, in all European Union for additional streams of Belarusians which will go, would like to go outside Belarus, political immigrants, refugees from Belarus, but also we need to have on our mind also humanitarian help for Belarusian people inside Belarus. So a lot of jobs, a lot of threats outside, in front of us in the future. Yeah.
I want to add a little bit shortly about future of Belarusian-Ukrainian relations. Speaking about relations of government to Lukashenko's regime, as I said, after crossing of this red line, when Lukashenko recognized Crimea as a part of Russia, Lukashenko became to be too toxic for Ukrainian politics, for Ukrainian society, first of all, because actually Ukraine never have had a government which had really critical political thought towards Lukashenko. And even now, if we will remember what happened in 1 year ago, yes, even this actual government of Zelensky, of Shmyhal, they had politic of separation of political crisis, as they call them, from economy. And they said that politics is one thing and economy is other thing, and we wouldn't provide any sanctions against Belarus. But after Lukashenko crossed this red line, any cooperation with Lukashenko will be too toxic, because for Ukrainian society, cooperation with any politic who recognize Crimea is impossible, never, and it's very strongly position of Ukrainian society. So that's why I think that any other government, I said any other because it can change in any moment in Ukrainian politics, but for any other government for Ukrainian cooperation with Lukashenko will be too toxic, and that's why I think that governments will try to make this energy trade dependence of Ukraine from Belarus less and less. And but the problem which we have that Ukrainian state, Ukrainian society right now actually have no any dialogue with Belarusian society, because from one hand we have no dialogue and dialogue with Lukashenko's regime, and we have no some initiatives which was like Forum of Region was a few years ago, etc. It was all closed right now. But also we have no dialogue, Ukrainians, I mean, with Belarus Democratic Society. I mean, Svetlana Tikhanovskaya and her team. This dialogue right now is in very low level, unfortunately, and I think that one of missions also of our group is to try to begin this dialogue, yes, of Ukrainian society with Belarusian Democratic Society, to try make more understandable for Ukrainians what is Belarusian Democratic Society, and to Belarusian Democratic Society what is Ukrainian society, and how they should speak with each other. And so I think it's one of our missions. That's why we always will have a lot texts about Ukraine, about Ukrainian society, about this dialogue.
If I may add just one thing to that, I do believe it's very important to underline that an alternative democracy in Belarus and the EU versus authoritarianism in Russia is false. It is possible to imagine a Belarusian society that strives for democracy and have a close cooperation with Russia. In our region, I do believe it's very important to remember that's these two things are not exclusive in certain parts of Belarusian society, I think, right? Thank you.
So, yeah, any more thoughts to add?
So maybe just summarizing, it's not like that some of our views, opinions, analysis sounds pessimistic. So I just guess and let's try. So it's not our aim to be pessimistic or sounds like a pessimist, but let's remember about this failure of the binary thinking about Belarus now from the science 2020, and let's try being in a good mood and being optimistic for this situation. But so let's try to analyze this situation not from position of our visual thinking, but more from the factual state of the Belarusian society now.
A very great advice, and I think we can end our discussion with this great note. So thank you very much for everyone who followed our discussion on our Facebook channel. Thank you very much for our speakers, and stay tuned for more discussions and news on our page. Thank you.
Thank you.